Assalamu alaikum, namaste, shalom, ni hao, ladies and gentlemen. A very good day to all of you in all the 525 metros you may be across the world, in whichever time zones we are. Welcome to Sustainable Success, Accelerating Business as a Force for Good. The Sustainable Success Globinar series will bring in experts on how to build businesses that support the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Moreover, through social development, environmental protection, and economic growth and collaboration between the private sector and the local government. Your host for today happens to be me, Maimun Musafa, the Executive Director of Global Chamber, Dhaka. And I'm very privileged to have in this Globinar room and this Facebook Live session on Zoom, as well as the Facebook platform, a lovely set of knowledgeable experts from across the globe. Let me take a small moment to introduce all of them. Firstly, we have Christina, who is the founder and CEO of Profit Reimagined from the Global Chamber as well. We have our keynote speaker, Carolina Miranda, the founder and CEO of Cultivating Capital. We then have Shihab Kader, the International Project Manager from the Yunus Center, and then Sylvie Esmonera, the Program Officer of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about how to create business practices that follow the B Corp certification. And this is something very novel to maybe a lot of you, but this is the only certification that measures how a company's operations and business model can impact their workers, their community, environment, and customers, and hence builds a local ecosystem that invests in thriving social businesses to create a financial framework that balances purpose and profit and collaboration between local government and private sectors to deal with climate change. I think the panel that we have today exemplifies all the stakeholders that are responsible for creating this and making this possible. As such, I'm privileged to first introduce our keynote speaker, Carolina Miranda, the founder and CEO of Cultivating Capital. Now, Carolina has been a certified B Corp since 2012 and works with small businesses to implement sustainable business practices. As a green business, sustainability, and B Corp consultant, she works with hundreds of organizations to implement social and environmental initiatives so that they can get certified and also establish 5-year business sustainability action plans. She's also involved with the B Corp Women and CEOs group. Carolina, thank you for coming onto our platform today and to present your keynote. The screen is all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you again for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here and to be talking about B Corps, which is a very exciting movement that is taking place globally to use business as a force for good. So I will go ahead and share my screen here. There we go. And I do have a few slides prepared just to provide a basic overview of what B Corps are, how companies can get certified, and what are some initiatives that B Corps tend to rally around. And then I'll be happy to take any questions during the Q&A because there's definitely a lot of material to cover. But to get us started, just to add a little bit to the introduction that you just provided, I wanted to just share a little bit more about my background specifically with B Corps. So Cultivating Capital did get certified as a B Corp in 2012. I actually started the business in 2010, but you have to be in operation for 1 year before you can get certified. And there are groups called B Locals, which are groups of regional B Corps that get together to network and support each other on a regional basis. So I am in the San Francisco Bay Area, and so I've served on our board here. And then last year, B Lab, which is the nonprofit that actually coordinates the B Corp movement and the certification, they actually started a pilot program to train consultants to actually verify the impact assessments of companies that want to recertify. And so I've been participating in that pilot program. And most recently, I've joined the executive committee for the B Corp Women CEOs group. So this is just to kind of share a little bit more to say that for more than a decade, really, I've been very involved and supporting this movement. So again, it's a pleasure to be here to share information about it with you. In terms of the B Corp certification, I mentioned B Lab. This is a nonprofit that started in the United States, outside of Philadelphia, actually. And really the focus has been on how do we create an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economic system that works for all people and for the planet. That's the vision. And this is definitely looking at the capitalist system. So it's not saying we need to do away with capitalism. It's just saying, let's rethink it so that it actually works for everyone. Because unfortunately, we've seen that our current system as it's structured is not working for everyone, nor is it working for the planet. So when we think about the evolution of business, we can look at the 20th century, and we know that the focus there was on shareholder capitalism. So shareholder capitalism meant you maximize value for your shareholders. So basically make sure that the people who own the company, who own shares in the company, are seeing financial returns. And that is fine in one sense, but the drawback is it means that other people who are affected by the company don't have a voice and they don't have a say, and their concerns aren't taken into account. And so what B Corps are doing is saying, let's center stakeholder capitalism. And stakeholders are basically anybody who has a stake in how that company operates, regardless of whether they actually have shares in the company. And so once you look at it that way, then you're really expanding everybody that the company needs to take into account, because then you need to consider employees, suppliers, members of the local community, certainly the environment. So now you're operating not just to make financial profits for one group, but really to create social value for all of these groups. And I do want to just reiterate that, again, this is not saying we're going to do away with capitalism. It's just saying we're going to reap our financial profits in a way that is more aligned with treating all people equally, equitably, respectfully, making sure that people can work with dignity, making sure that suppliers in factories are not being exploited. So it's just saying we want to make our profits in a way that is just more values driven. And obviously, this is something that we are seeing not just as an idealistic view of what business should be like, but it's actually being driven by consumer demand. So we know that consumers in many cases are looking for to support companies that actually can make their profits in ways that the consumers themselves can feel good about supporting that company. So, all things being equal, especially now in an era of greater transparency, we've seen the backlash when stories come out about businesses engaging in practices, where maybe they are not treating their suppliers well, or they're not treating their employees well. There is a backlash. Companies cannot keep their practices hidden the way that they were able to do, 20 years ago. And so as there's greater transparency, as there's greater awareness, we're seeing consumers actually respond in kind. And so one of the things that has been missing is actually a certification that can signal to the consumers, this is a good company that is engaging in positive practices. We have a number of different certifications that basically operate at the product level. So organic, for example, says, well, this product is organic, but it doesn't mean that the company is actually, treating its workers well, treating the farm workers well. We have certifications that say, well, this company is buying fair trade from suppliers, but it doesn't mean that they are actually following, good environmental practices in everything that they do. So what B Corp certification is doing is it's basically stepped in to fill that gap. It's not a product level certification. It's not saying we've reviewed this one product and it meets our standards. It basically looks at the entire company and says this company has met some clear and transparent standards for social and environmental performance for its impact across all stakeholder groups. So one thing to understand about B Corps, and this is actually one of the things that I have found most compelling about this movement, is that it's not just giving a certification because a company is engaged in certain practices, but there's actually a legal component to it. So it actually requires that the company actually become, in states and countries where benefit corporations exist, it requires that the company become a benefit corporation. And this is a legal entity that operates similar to other corporations, but it does require that the company embed in its legal documents a commitment to all stakeholders. So this is something, again, the movement started here in the US. Here in the US, it's been passed state by state. So currently there is benefit corporation legislation in 34 out of 50 states, but it has also passed in Puerto Rico and in Italy. And again, we are still in the very early stages of this movement. The founding B Corps were certified in 2007. So we are less than 15 years into this movement overall. And just to give you some ideas of who are some well-known B Corps, there's a lot of really small B Corps like my own company, but there are also some that are household names. So Danone is probably one of the bigger, well-known companies. This is a multinational company with a portfolio of brands within its corporate entity. And so I know, for example, there is one of their subsidiaries in Dhaka actually has been certified as a B Corp. Avion, which is a Danone brand, has recently been certified as well. Companies like Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia, which is very well known, The Guardian, which is an international publication. These are all companies that have basically stepped into kind of the leadership of this movement. Because right now there are about just over 4,000 certified B Corps around the world. Just under half of those, I believe it's about 1,800 or so, are here in the US. The others are actually outside of the US. And currently the movement is actually growing faster outside of the US than it is in the US, although it is growing very quickly here in the US as well. And in fact, with the pandemic and a lot of the issues that we saw, particularly here in the US, with people not having access to medical care, during the pandemic, that has actually elevated the need for companies to step up. So we're definitely seeing increased demand within the US, but then also outside of the US, there's great interest. There are B Corps in 77 countries. In fact, there are B Corps on every continent except for Antarctica. So there's B Corps in obviously the US and Canada, in throughout Latin America, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Australia, New Zealand. This is, again, a global movement. And you can see it's across 153 industries. So you have an ice cream company, you have a clothing company, you have a news publication company, you have consumer products, you have professional services, you have a wide range of industries, but they're all united by this one common goal: to use business as a force for good, to create an economic system that is inclusive, equitable, and regenerative. That's what drives us. And just to give you a taste of what the global movement is like, you can see here, these are just some companies that have recently been certified. A company in Australia, one in New York. This one here is in the Netherlands. This one, financial planning company in the UK. Here are a few that are certified in India. Looks like business consultants, financial services, handcrafted cement tiles, safe drinking water. There's really just a whole range of companies that are getting certified as B Corps. So now that hopefully you have a bit of a better idea of what B Corps are and how this movement came about, I wanted to share with you a little bit about what the certification process is like and who can certify and why somebody would undertake this process. So this is a movement for for-profit companies. It's not for nonprofits. It's any for-profit company of any size. So whether it's a one-person business or whether it's a multinational like Danone, they can move forward with certification. As we saw, any geographic areas, just about any industry, any legal structure. So regardless of how the company is currently set up, whether it's a corporation, whether it's an LLC, other countries outside of the US have different corporate structures, and the B Corp model adapts on a regional basis to whatever the most common and governing structures are for that particular regional area. The only requirement is that the company does need to be in operation for more than a year, because the way that the B Corp certification works is it looks at what a company has done, not what it wants to do. And so that's very, very important. The company has to be able to demonstrate beneficial practices. And so that's why a startup that just is just getting underway is not eligible to certify. And in terms of why companies certify, there's really a lot of reasons. One big thing is this is a global community unlike any other global community of change makers. And so a lot of these companies are actually voluntarily stepping up to be leaders of this movement to show that business can be used as a force for good. A lot of them do it, particularly in terms of the legal requirement to make sure that the mission is maintained, even if the company is sold later. Certainly, it's an incredible way to differentiate from competitors. If you have two companies that are both saying they're doing good, but one actually has the B Corp certification, which is becoming more recognizable, to consumers, versus the other company it's just their own claims. Obviously, the one that has been vetted by a third party is going to, be a bit more meaningful. One other thing is that the tool that's used to get certified does allow you to benchmark your performance. So you can actually see how your company is doing against companies in a similar region, in a similar industry of a similar size. And so that actually helps you to determine, what are the areas where you're doing well, what are the areas where you can improve. Attracting and engaging talent. A lot of people, particularly millennials, are looking to work for companies that they can feel good about. And so B Corps do find that they do tend to attract people who want to, do work that's aligned with their values. In some cases, even recognizing that, they might be able to earn a higher salary at another company, but they actually choose to work with a B Corp because they know that there's going to be these other intangible benefits that they're going to be able to realize. Because the community is still relatively small, there's a lot of collaboration, even among companies in similar industries. There's no need to compete when they know that, they're all out there kind of working as part of this movement. A lot of B Corps will also offer discounts on services to other B Corps. So, there are ways to actually save money. And then raising capital, for a long time in the early years of the movement, there was a concern that companies could not raise capital from investors, from venture capitalists if they were B Corps. And what we're seeing now is that actually that's not true. Again, I'm here in California, not far from Silicon Valley, and every major venture capital firm in Silicon Valley has actually invested in B Corps. So there's a number of reasons why companies will choose to go through the certification process. And that process basically starts with completing the B Impact Assessment. And that is an online tool. You can think of it as a very long questionnaire that looks at a company's impact across all stakeholders. So the company has to complete that. As a company answers that they are engaged in positive practices, they start to earn points. And then once they get up to 80 points, they can submit their assessment. Of course, they do have to meet that legal requirement, which I spoke about. And then they go through a fairly lengthy review process. And during that review process, an analyst from B Lab will actually verify at least 80 points. And then once they verify that the company has met the standards of at least 80 points, then you can go on, sign the agreement, and pay the fees. Currently, about 40% of the companies that submit their assessments don't go on to get certified. They kind of drop off during that review process. And that just speaks to really the rigor of the certification. It's not the easiest certification to get, and that's why it's all the more meaningful when a company does have that. And in terms of the the areas that are covered on the impact assessment, there's basically 5 areas. Each of these looks at a different stakeholder group. And so the first section is actually looking at governance, but the other sections are looking at practices related to workers, the community, environment, and customers, because customers are a very important stakeholder group as well. And so you can see here, it does include an environmental component, but there's more to it than just environmental sustainability. And so, some of the things that come up are, what kinds of benefits are provided to workers? What kind of professional development opportunities do they have? What's the highest level of the company's governing structure? Is there a board of directors with fiduciary responsibility? Is there an advisory board? How is the company reporting on its social and environmental practices? What is the company doing to give back to the community? Is it making financial contributions? Is it involved in pro bono work? What environmental practices are in place? If the company is selling a product, does that product have any recycled inputs, any organic inputs? And in terms of customers, what protections are in place for customers? What types of privacy policies, for example, are in place? What type of email marketing practice policies are in place in order to make sure that customers' information isn't just being sold to third parties? So that's just to give you a taste of what the impact assessment looks like and really how comprehensive it is. There's about 200 questions overall on the impact assessment. And then I want to just wrap up just by sharing some of kind of the initiatives that B Corps as a community engage in, because once you get certified, that certification is valid for 3 years, by the way. Every 3 years, the impact assessment itself also gets updated. So what that means is that when a company goes to recertify, they're actually seeing new questions that weren't there before. And so one of the things that I personally love about that framework is it means that continuous improvement is really built into the system. The company can't just say, well, we were doing well 3 years ago, so we just remain a B Corp. It doesn't work that way. In fact, it's not uncommon for companies to see their score go down, as they see, as new practices are introduced and they need to kind of, keep up. But once a company does get certified, they are part of this community. And so here are some initiatives that B Corps are working on. Anti-racism is very important. I mentioned that we're looking for an economic system that is inclusive and equitable, in addition to being regenerative. And we know that, throughout the world, there are different groups that are being excluded. Here in the US, it happens to be Black people and people of color. But certainly if we look through every other region of the country, there are going to be different groups that are being disproportionately left behind. And so B Corps as a group focus on anti-racism on all levels. Another area that is really important is the B Corp Climate Collective. And so these are B Corps that are coming together particularly to respond to the climate crisis. So, we're probably as a global community in the very early stages of witnessing significant changes that are going to come about in the coming years as a result of climate change. This is no longer an abstract idea. If you look at wildfires, certainly here in California, but throughout the world, wildfires, heat waves, these storms, hurricanes, in parts of I was just reading not that long ago, northern parts of Siberia are actually seeing temperatures of 100 degrees, which was unheard of before. So we are in the early stages of witnessing these global climate impacts, and we're at a point where every company needs to step up to respond to the climate crisis. So B Corps have the Climate Collective, and it's a great website, by the way, a lot of free resources. And what we're doing is really centering the climate justice. So it's recognizing that the people that are least responsible for climate change are the ones that are going to bear the impacts the most. And that, that is not right. We should not just sit by and let that happen. And so really putting climate justice front and center is very important. We the Change, this is the B Corp Women CEOs. The last statistic I heard is approximately a third of all B Corps were run by women. And so we as a community of women CEOs want to do more together than we can do on our own. And so we have organized around different initiatives. Last year with the elections here in the US, we were very focused on getting out the vote because there was so much at stake from a social and environmental perspective. But now that the elections are over, we are looking at what are kind of global issues that are affecting, all women, and what are the areas that, we can actually step into. Just a couple more and then I'll wrap up here. B Lab has a campaign called Vote Every Day. And so this is basically encouraging consumers to actually use their spending dollars to support companies that are B Corp. So if they're going to go out and buy something, when possible, buy it from a B Corp, because that company is actually working to try to do this good in the world. So this is a campaign that B Lab did, and then the good thing is that when B Lab does campaigns, then those materials become available to all B Corps, and so it is a way to kind of maximize the voice of an individual company, because they'll do like social media campaigns, and you have a bunch of B Corps kind of participating, raising that consumer awareness. Imperative 21 is basically like a network of networks. And so it's recognizing that, while B Corps are doing a lot of work, we're not the only community that is trying to address social and environmental issues through the private sector. And so there are some other groups, and we can't work, in isolation from them. And so Imperative 21 is basically saying, let's kind of leverage our networks to really affect the kind of change that we want to see. And the last one that I'll share with you is movement builders, because this is one that B-Lab actually put together specifically for multinational publicly traded companies, because one, just the nature, the scale of those companies is different from just a smaller business. And so there are very particular considerations that need to be taken into account. And it's also going to take them, longer to kind of affect some of these changes. So this is for companies that have at least 1 billion in annual revenue. And it's basically a pathway for them to get started on certification. Once they certify, a company like Danone still has to go through that same process that I showed you earlier. They still have to complete the impact assessment. They still have to get a score of 80. They still have to have that vetted by a standards analyst. They still have to meet the legal requirement. So all of those things are still in place. But for those companies that are not yet ready to become B Corps, the Movement Builders provides them with a pathway. And then just to wrap up, on my website, I have a B Corp guide, and it basically just includes links to a lot of the resources that I mentioned here. So, I wasn't dropping links into the chat, but if anybody is interested, you can just go to cultivatingcapital.com/B Corp guide. There's links there to We the Change, to the Climate Collective, to the Antiracism resources. So you kind of have them all in one place. And certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to support@cultivatingcapital.com, and somebody on my team will get back to you. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Carolina. I think 20 minutes was a little bit too short to understand about a movement so big, but thank you for cramming all of that in. I was really happy to see that somebody in the chat was already interested to become a B Corp. So you might want to think about connecting with him or her. I believe they represent the Lawyers Collective. However, when we talk about so many issues, right, I think we understand one thing going forward, that sustainability is no more just about greening. The environment is important, but it's about a lot more things than that, right? And we think about social impacts. We think about social businesses. And when these keywords are in your head, I think there's no one better who would be better to actually speak about these kind of topics that include insights about local ecosystem, about how startup entrepreneurs should be working, and how can they be impact driven through incubators and strategic investments. Now, who is this person who's going to talk more? This is a special nomination from one of our collaborators, Impact Hub Dhaka, and we have Shihab there, who is the international project manager of the UniCenter. Let me just tell you a little bit about Shihab. Again, to everyone who wants to understand a little bit of culture in the midst of sustainability, Pai is something we say in Bangladesh, literally meaning brother. So Shihab Pai is somebody who emphasizes in social businesses and market development in emerging and frontier markets. Now, he's handled multiple game-changing initiatives for 8 years with a cumulative value of more than $500 million. That's a lot. I think we're seeing a lot of big numbers here today. He specializes in strategy design and implementation for C-suites, and he's currently based in the UniCenter in Dhaka with a growing portfolio of international projects that do focus on social business development. Now, he used to head 13 social enterprises and handle their strategic growth initiatives. And moreover, he facilitated design, risk, and partnership management between comparable donors in one of the world's largest NGOs. Shihab Bhai, we'd love to hear from you.
Hey, Maimun, that was too much of a build-up. I already almost had a little bit of vertigo here. I won't be able to live up to all those words. But thank you. It's an honor to be amidst a talented panel of speakers, including Sylvie, Christina, and Carolina. And as I said, coming into this meeting, I had some basic knowledge of B Corps. Even one of my social businesses was a B Corp, but we never really highlight that as much in our travels, in our workshops. So it's great to see that the B Corp movement is still going strong even after a decade. And for developing economies and LDCs graduating to a developed economies as we move on post pandemic. I think B Corp has a lot of potential, especially in Southeast Asia, in Asian countries as well, alongside with the Pan-Pacific region. And with that, let me just go into my slides first. As Maimun said, I'm not as big. He tipped me off like the Michael Jordan of social business, but that's actually Professor Mohammed Yunus, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate and the founder and pioneer of Grammy Bank and Microcredit. So I helped his team with a range of diversified portfolio that ranges in Colombia to East Africa. And I helped a couple of the international projects that focuses on academia and advocacy for promoting social business. And what is social business? It's B Corp is more of a systematic, very structured approach, very sophisticated, I should say, for certifying your business into doing good. And I would say social business is B Corp for the poor. What I meant to say is it starts from a very young age. If you are a 11-year-old kid going into teenager, or even if you are having a midlife crisis in your 30s, or if you are almost retiring, anyone can join up and be a part of the movement just to do good. So I will first try to start. Let's see if I can share my screen. Let me know, Maimun, if you can see mine.
Yeah, but we can see you.
All right. Thanks, man. I think it's taking its sweet time to load. I'm going to test everyone's patience with our connection in Bangladesh. All right. Okay, dope. So here goes nothing. So this is a picture of one of our post-academia conferences. We deal with academia and research mostly at Yunus Center. You would see Professor Mohammed Yunus and his esteemed panelists and people from all walks of life, from startups who failed and startups who did a good job. There are also some people from Grammy over here. So the mood is very chirpy. And just to give you a minor glance of what we do at Yunus Center, basically we're a movement that concerns with the advocacy of social business. And anywhere around the world, if anybody wants to know more about social business, what's it about, to learn more about it, how to be a change maker, and be it in academia or being a startup founder, we are here to help with any resources, any networking that is possible. And we also look towards partnering and making strong social business joint ventures. The Grameen Danone project was one of them. Grameen Eugelina was another one. Grameen Intel was another one as well. And research remains a key strong component of ours. I think we have, the data is a bit backdated. Right now, we have around 94 YSBCs. Those are like small research hubs in 92 universities across 36 countries, where I think we are advocating for social business research, and any good that comes out of it, I think students and academia are more inspired to start a business of their own through that. And other than that, we do strategic alliances and outreach programs, and I can think of so many alliances that can be done with the B Corp movement as well as we go along. But we will keep that to a later time frame. And in a nutshell, like, how does social business work? It's while Carolina was going through her PowerPoint presentation, it was quite informative. I could see like it matches everything with what a social business essentially is. It starts off with a very what I can say is an impactful idea of doing good for a community, be it in your village or your neighborhood or even a local region per se, and you tackle a social problem. Until unless your business does not tackle a social problem, it cannot start off as a social business. And once you are initially invested in the company as an investor, the only way you can recoup the investment is after you have sold the products and made a profit, but you cannot use the profit as dividend. So essentially, a social business is a non-dividend company. And people might say, so if you're an entrepreneur, what is your benefit of starting a business if you don't get any dividend? So that's where Professor Mohammed Yunus kind of like gives like a trump card or a like a curveball for the capitalist, saying that the existing mechanisms of capitalism, it doesn't work. He's not trying to change it. And the social business is not necessarily a silver bullet for all the nuances that capitalism brings us, but it's another tool for doing good. So the way he sees it, like if you take out dividends as part of your profit, you are using that nth potential to do better in the timeline. So instead of putting your dividend in your pocket, why don't you reinvest in the company? Why don't you increase your portfolio? Why don't you increase your geographical footprint? So you can, instead of putting that end term of dividend in your pocket, you can easily increase the business in terms of the duration of the business is concerned, and you can maximize your impact potential in a shorter time frame. And as we go along, so that's I think I would say the basic difference between all the regular B Corp, the 4,000 ones that Carolina said, and the social business that we have. That our social business has to be a non-dividend one, and obviously it has to have that social impact in mind at the very beginning. And there are 7 guiding principles that he says that henceforth should guide social businesses. One is, as I said, it has to have a social impact. It has to cater to a social problem and find a viable business solution for it. And it is strictly against non-donor, non-charity, or non-aid company. It has to be a financially and economically sustainable and viable company, because it has to ultimately in the marketplace, we have to compete with for-profit companies as well. And you have to compete with the giants. So unless your company is not profitable, you can't really go to the big businesses. And as I said, the investor has to get their, after they get the investment back, it's a no dividend policy for them. And number 5 and number 6, it's very important, especially in this era. It has to be gender sensitive, and the business has to be environmentally conscious, and the workforce has to get market wages and have better work conditions, especially in a country like Bangladesh, where we see that a lot of workforce, if it's an NGO per se, they try to retain workers with a lower market salary, saying that the market rate is bad, the pandemic is not doing wonders for us, so we will reduce the salary. But that's we are directly adamant against it, saying that that's really against the principle of a social business. Like, you have to treat your workers as proper human beings. And the 7th, which is obviously in my book the first principle to begin with, is to do it with joy. And what we found out in our research is, unlike other startups or a social enterprise, a social business entrepreneur deals with more hardships than the average entrepreneur. And if you're spending 70 hours of your work week every day when you start a company, you will get a lot of gridlocks, a lot of bottlenecks. The naysayers are plentiful, especially in this part of the region. And the political and geopolitical scenario doesn't really help you out a lot. So regardless of which industry you're in, if you can do it with joy, it makes your job a lot more easier. And another thing is the SDGs. So anytime, especially in Bangladesh, if you are setting up a social business and you're out there making your proposals as a young entrepreneur and you are looking for funds, it's very good to have these 17 SDGs aligned with your business. Let's say if you're working for number 15, life on land, or industrial innovation, or affordable clean energy. If you work with these SDG elements and the subcategories that they have, your proposal becomes more solidified. I usually share this presentation slides with young students, people who are in the first, who are actually starting out in their careers of academia, introduction to business and all that, just to give them a yardstick as to how to measure their proposals well compared to the other ones out there. And when you talk about social businesses in Bangladesh, right now, there are more than 45 to 60 social businesses. These are the top tier ones, the Grammy Danone that we talked about. There was another corporation between Grammy Uniqlo, a Japanese company. There's a nursing college as well. And the lists are endless. I'm very happy to say that like not all of them are at the break-even point, or they are doing spectacular financially. But the true beauty of a social business is you stick to it. So it may be 5 years or 8 years. One day or the other, the benchmark point will come in, and you will find yourself to be sustainable. And this is, we partnered with BCG, the Boston Consultancy Group, and they actually looked at a couple of our social businesses. This was, I think, 5 years or a decade ago. And what they found out was, like, how does a social business get inspired into formation? So in the top left corner, if you look at Grammy Danone Foods, which is actually a partnership with the Danone company in France and the Grameen Corporation in Bangladesh. So when the chairman of Danone first met with Professor Mohamed Yunus in France after a conference in Paris, he said that what can we do to help the underprivileged population in Bangladesh, especially in the northern region. So Professor Yunus said, why don't you come and have a look for yourself? So they visited the region and they went to a primary education, a primary school. And in Bangladesh, primary education is free. And I think for girls, it's up to secondary education as well. So when they went there, after an hour of class, what they found out, the children were suffering from malnutrition. And how did this realize that? The children were actually dozing off to sleep. I like probably have the audience in my dream presentation right now. So they're saying that if I think, so they followed the children back home and they said that the quality of food that they had, maybe it was like a one bowl of rice with nothing in them except for salt, maybe some lentil soup. This was a decade ago as well. So economic hardship in the northern region was much more dire. So they said that what can we do so as to instill a better diet, better nutrition for these children, and to also make them excited about better nutrition that will ultimately translate into a better performance. So they developed a very specific fortified nutritional yogurt, which had all the macronutrients that someone like an athlete would have, like an athlete having Gatorade up there after the intensive workout. And then they sold this product at a sub margin price. So if the product was around $5, I'm using imaginary pricing. So if the product was around $5, they sold the product for like $1 in the rural markets. And how did they recoup this investment? They sold the same product because the product was of such a high quality. They just redefined the packaging, they upscaled the packaging, and they sold the same product in the urban markets for a higher margin. And through this cross subsidization, this is a term that we in social businesses use very widely. Through this cross subsidization, they were able to reach a benchmark in almost, I think, 8 years from the operations. And that's how you can market the same product to the rural population so that they could benefit so it can benefit the livelihood and economic potential, as well as you can revive your company's financial for forecasting outgrowth by selling the same product at a more lucrative market at a higher price. And the difference between a social business and an NGO or a social enterprise is, so we are mostly focused on social impact from the get-go. So if you look at a NGO, most of their funds, as you know, comes from a donor-driven mandate. So if the donor stops funding one fund year, you would find you are unable to pay your the salaries of your employees even, just like we are seeing it in Afghanistan right now. And in social enterprises, I think the cost and the maximizing social impact goes hand in hand with maximizing profitability. However, in social business, we always put social impact, maximizing that part at first hand. After that, we are more focused with getting into financial sustainability. And these are a couple of the lessons that that BCG realized that after talking to all the MDs, the managing directors, and the executive directors of the social business of around 40 companies. They said this is the framework that needs to be followed if you want a social business to start up. And it would take around ideally for 2 to 3 years at least, to say the minimum. It's a bit text a bit wordy. So if anybody wants, if anybody is interested in seeing this full presentation, just drop me an email and I will gladly share it. And these are our affiliates around the world. So Grammy Creative Lab on the top left, they deal with the promotion and the campaigning of social businesses. We have yearly 3 or 4 big conferences going on, mostly in Germany and all over the world. And the social businesses is the social business, actually. It's the incubation or the impact investment fund per se. So we have the social businesses in East Africa. We have offices in Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania right now. We have 2 in India as well. And these social businesses, the company starts off with very small micro loans. A student might start off with let's say a $1,000 loan or a $10,000 loan. The amount of loans is quite direct, very small, but the volume of loans, the volume of the recuperation rate, that's really high comparatively. And side by side, we have 2 separate hubs right now. So there's a Yunus Environment Hub and a Yunus Sports Hub. So these were essentially tailored and customized to utilize environment and sports as a change agent for social business to strive in this industry in particular. As people know, Professor Yunus has 3 zeros. He always keeps saying this, that we need to be a world where we have 0 net carbon emissions, 0 unemployment, and 0 wealth concentration for 0 poverty. So he believes that a specific focus on environment and sports and sports as a catalyst for change is the big ticket. And people, I'm sure you also know that Professor Yunus also won the Olympic Laurel Award for using sports as a business for impact for change. This was the second time in its Olympics history that it has been given to an individual. These are a couple of the conferences that we go to and we arrange all over to generate more interest on social business. And a couple of activities. I can go into details, but I think I'm stuck for time here. And this is in a snapshot what we did. So in Colombia, when you went to Colombia in I think 2 years ago, people knew nothing about social business, but B Corp was already there, mind you. So that was a good positive start. So in 2 years, what we did was we partnered with 4 or 5 local universities. We set up 2 research centers in one leading one in Bogota and another one in Cali. And we started a series of workshops and engaging students, engaging practitioners and academia to adopt social business as a teaching mechanism, as a teaching subject, to develop curriculum, and also to inspire students and entrepreneurs to start social businesses. And Yunus Social Business was also there from before. And we were able to at least inspire and in fact invest in almost 20 to 25 social businesses over there. And the impact was massive. People from Mexico, from Venezuela, from Brazil always were reaching out to us and saying, how can we partner best? And the impact was so good that we wanted to replicate the exact same model in East Africa, in Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. So right now we are working at the same model, but since it's a couple of countries, a diversified portfolio of countries, Kenya's needs are very different from Ethiopia's. So we're trying to do the same thing that we did in Colombia, but trying to modify it through the East African lenses. And hopefully we will have some impact by 2023, and we would love to share with you what we're doing moving on as we go along. These are the couple of research papers that we are working in Colombia. 2 of them are tipped off at being published in the Harvard Journal, in one of the Harvard Business Journals. So hopefully it's still in the works. It will take us another year to complete the research. We are just giving you a snapshot. And we also have a lecture series that we want to focus on bringing change through social business, through continuous dialogue. So we have Emmanuel Faber, the CEO of Grammy, the only B Corp in Bangladesh that my mom so correctly pointed out. And we also are working with, as Christina was mentioning in her slides, there was a lot of information regarding the BLM movement and equality and equanimity out there. And given the pandemic situation, Professor Ahmad Yunus, he started off a big campaign which was focused on making the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, a global common good. So I think 1.5 years ago, even before the vaccines were into production, he foresaw a point in time that there will be a crisis especially in the poorer parts of the world, where people won't have the vaccine at the same time as the rich nations. This would cause a multitude of variants. Mind you, he's not a chemist or he's not a pharmacist, but since he's a global leader, a thought leader, and he has been with neck and neck with all these Nobel laureates from beforehand in his past experience, he saw this coming and he reached out to all those global leaders out there. So people from George Clooney to Matt Damon to 23 Nobel laureates, from Malala Yousafzai to I think there are others. I keep forgetting their names. And there's Mary Robinson, there's Mahathir Mohamad as well, and even Bonos and the Thomas Bachs of the world. They all joined in, and we were almost very close in reaching a maximum consensus in passing a UN resolution to declare the COVID as a global common good. And global common good is what it essentially means is just like the air you breathe or the water you drink, it's free for all. So a citizen of the world, regardless of any gender, creed, religion, or the color of your skin, you should have the right to access a vaccine if you choose to do so. Unfortunately, the big pharma lobby was really big, and we couldn't pass the resolution. But we are still doing the good fight in our very small way in the social business community. I will share the links in the chat section. So if any of you want to join our fight or be a part of this alliance, please do so. And we need all the help we can get. This is one of the other, I would say, the movement, the doing good movement that comes or stems from the basic core values of social business, of doing good for the community. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we want to create a social business in the pharmaceutical industry, which we haven't seen now. Right now, as you know, in this pandemic, we have helped create almost 9 new billionaires, which we haven't already seen before the pandemic. So we are really against that, and we want, hopefully we will see more B Corps in the pharmaceutical industry as well. So we need to fight people. And this is where we are heading for the next 10 years. I would say that we are working on developing more academic research on social business. We are trying to strive more with startups and students who want to be startups in social businesses, motivate them, give them more research, funding, or maybe startup funding through social businesses. And the ladder up to making a successful social business is really tough. I would say it's much tougher to make a social business than a social enterprise, but we can't take no for an answer, especially if you want to make a world of 3 zeros, a world of zero net carbon emissions, a world of zero unemployment, and a world of zero wealth creation that leads to zero poverty. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Thank you, Shia Bhai. And I think today was a really good educational experience for me, because for a long time, I couldn't personally understand the difference between social enterprise, social business, and of course, the idea of B Corps. But I do understand that they are here to stay, and they can, of course, have their own sense of impact in a particular way. You do mention about the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well, right? That should be something very important. And while you were talking about we, even from a least developing country or developing country, emerging country like Bangladesh, we can grow to have incubators, as you mentioned in India, that the developing and the emerging economies can actually step up to be sustainable. It's something that is not confined only to the first world. But the reason when all of these, words are shouted out about the UN SDGs, about finances, I mean, I just have to then go about and think about our next speaker, Christina Sali. Let me tell you a little bit about Christina, about how she's going to be, hopefully, be able to tell us how to find purpose and profit and understand where they can come to an interaction. Now, Christina is the founder and CEO of Profit Reimagined. She is a member of the Global Tribe. I'm very happy to say that. And she has been working very hard with me to pull this off today. So I have to give her that special shout out. I being the novice when it comes to the world of B Corp, but maybe a little bit of an amateur after today. Now, Christina's organization acts as a virtual CFO service that partners with businesses which are passionate in addressing those 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, so that people can live a purposeful life. Now, she's had an amazing career in 3 out of the top 4 big consulting firms. That's EY, KPMG, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. And she brings that into the table when she's engaging with public and private companies to work with them and develop financial frameworks where sustainability meets profitability. Christina, we'd like to know a lot more about how this is possible, so let the finances flow.
Simon, thank you so much for that introduction. I hope I can live through that. So welcome everyone. As Maimun said, my name is Christina Shaklee. I am the founder and CEO of Profit Reimagined. Now, before we get into all this required financial framework where sustainability meets profitability, I want to share with you a story. And then by the end of this presentation, you will understand why I share these stories. So there is a successful, once this startup based in the US was considered as one of the success story. And the reason this startup was considered a success story is because this startup received $6 billion of investment from various investors. It's not million, it's billion. And then they expanded to 100 locations in various different countries. By the end of 2019, they were getting ready to become a publicly listed company in the US. At that moment, they recorded the highest revenue ever in their existence. Their revenue was $3.2 billion. Again, it's a B. It's not million, it's billion. So imagine that. So do you wonder, where is this company right now with $6 billion investment and $3.2 billion of revenue? If you haven't heard the story about WeWork and the collapse about WeWork, now you know. WeWork collapsed by early 2020. Why do they collapse? And then what is so missing in their concept with $6 billion of revenue and $3.2 billion, $6 billion of investment and $3.2 billion of revenue? How is it possible? Here's why. One, they focus on hyper growth. They didn't care about profitability. They just focusing and growing on their revenue. They're using all their $6 billion to grow to different locations, 100 locations in a very short period of time. That's number one. Number two, they focus in making money for the founder and the investors. That's why they were planning to go public in 2019, because that is their exit strategy. If they go public, they're going to make a lot of money for the founder and the investors. They didn't care about the stakeholders. In Carolina's presentation, there are a lot of talk about stakeholders. We talked about the workers, the community, the consumers, the environment, right? Those are the stakeholders that we need to take care of. So my question to you, if you are creating a business at the moment, what can you do to ensure that you are not becoming a victim of hyper growth and only making value for the investor or the shareholders alone? Reimagine profitability. So as you can see, there are two circles over here. The one on the left side, the smaller one, that is the famous Simon Sinek golden circles. Simon Sinek, if you haven't heard about Simon Sinek, is very famous with his TED Talk and book, Start With Why. He said, start with why, then you are going to figure out the how and the what. Now, at this moment, I really want you to think about this golden circle and then try to reimagine your business. Where does your business sit at the moment? Do you know your purpose? Because that is really your why. But you cannot just stop at your purpose. Once you figure out your purpose, you need to figure out what are your non-negotiable business practices. This is where the B impact assessment that Carolina shared earlier becomes really handy, because the B impact assessment talked about all the stakeholders. You know, for example, you can say that my non-negotiable is that my business is going to be net zero by 2030. That is your non-negotiable. I care about my workers, and because of that, I'm gonna promise my non-negotiable is paying them with the living wage. That's another non-negotiable. Or you can say, okay, I have a lot of suppliers that I'm working with because I need to produce a product, and I want to make sure that the suppliers that I'm working with, they are not employing child laborers. Those are your non-negotiable. So your purpose and then list of your non-negotiables. That is your why. Now, once you figure out your why and your non-negotiable, then you started expanding to the outer layer, which is all your business activities. Why? Because within all these business activities, you are making business decisions every single day. And if you don't understand what are your non-negotiable, if you don't understand your why, you are going to make the wrong business decision. But if you follow your North Star, if you follow your heart, and you follow the concept in the B impact assessment, you are going to build business practices between your sales, your marketing, your supply chain, your production, human resources, legal, capital raising, whatever it is, it's gonna focus on your non-negotiable business practices. You're making the right decision. That's your what. But where is the how now? The how is your financial process. The how is really the connector between your why and your what. A lot of business owner, a lot of businesses out there has this misconception. They're thinking finance is just a dollar sign. It's just money. Actually, it is not. Finance is a process, just like any other things within your business. It's the same like sales and marketing. If you don't have a financial process, a solid financial process within your business, then how can your business make money? Revenue alone, in the example of WeWork, won't make you profit. Remember that. So in the finance process, imagine finance process, it's like a bucket, and then you are making all this business decision within your human resources, your sales, your marketing, your supply chain. And finance is actually capturing those data. At the end of the day, when you look at the data, it will tell you if you are balancing between your purpose and your profit. That's how you're supposed to see finance. It is not a standalone process. It is a connector between your why and your what. So let me tell you how and what are the steps in finance that you can consider within your business so you can balance between purpose and profit. Number one, you want to make sure, always make sure you have a cash flow management report. And this cash flow management report, you are going to analyze it on a weekly basis in 3 areas: your operating activities, your investing activities, and your financing activities. Number 2, make sure you have a profit and loss statement based on an accrual basis. There is another misconception out there thinking that cash flow and profit and loss statement are the same thing. They're not. It's 2 different reports for 2 different purposes. Your profit and loss statement will tell you if your business model is actually profitable. Your cash flow statement is simply a tool to see how much cash is coming in, how much cash is going out, and how are you going to manage that. It's not going to tell you profitability. You need both reports, you need both systems, but it has 2 different purposes. Now, number 3, this is very, very critical, especially if you are a social business, if you want to have a sustainable business. Going back to the concept of understanding what are your non-negotiable business practices. Let's say that you want to become net zero by 2030. It's not going to happen within a year. Carolina mentioned in her talk, it's an innovation. It's something that you have to do little by little every time. And because of that, you have to look forward. You need to have a long-term financial forecast that will look forward 2 years to 5 years from now. Because then you can understand, if I have my non-negotiable business practices and then I want to accomplish net zero by 2030, what are the investments that I have to make in order to accomplish that? And how can I balance that between what I want to accomplish and my profitability? Without a roadmap, it's hard to get there. Now, is it possible then to create a business where you truly create value for your workers? You care about your consumers and you care about the environment and your community while still making profit? Yes, 1000% possible. Badger. This is one of the company that Carolina mentioned on her slide. Why Badger is so special? I had an opportunity to interview the CEO of Badger, Rebecca Hamilton, in my podcast. And if you want to listen to it, that is episode 126. So Badger, from the very beginning, their existence, they always focus on their non-negotiable business practices. They understand passionately what they never want to do to destroy the environment. How do they want to treat their employees from the very beginning? And they combine these sustainable practices with the financial acumen, with the financial maturity. They implemented the 3 steps that I just mentioned to you: the cash flow, the profit and loss statement, as well as the forecast. And you know what? The result of that, they've been in business for 25 years. 25 years. They are in the 2nd generation of leadership. Their product, from 1 product, now they have 100 products. And they are selling their product in 20 countries. Imagine this. If you compare between Badger and WeWork, yes, it took Badger many more years, but 25 years later, they are still here. So what is the difference? Badger focus on profitability. Badger focus on stakeholder values. And because of that, they are still in business and going strong. One of their recent accomplishments, during the pandemic, they invested in solar panel to basically providing energy for their whole operation. That is not a cheap investment. So when I was talking to Rebecca, the CEO, I said, what did you do exactly to understand the value of this solar panel? She said, if we look at it in a short term, it's a lot of cost to install the solar panel, but we are not focusing on the short term. We're focusing on a long term. When we do our forecast, when we do our long-term forecast, we realize at the end of the day, the cost of our energy later on, 5 years, 10 years from now is actually lower. And we are going to accomplish net zero by 2030. Sustainability meets profitability. So let me just close this with one thing that I want all of you to remember. Financial maturity plus sustainable business practices equal profitability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. Being an econ undergraduate myself, whenever I would look back as an entrepreneur, I thought, why didn't I take finance? Because all these numbers, they drive me crazy. But thank you for putting a little bit of that into perspective, especially when we're trying to do impact. And on the topic of impact, we've had 3 of you who've been amazing impactors. But you see, I'd like to go on to a friend today, who's our final guest panelist. Now, you see, you always want to say that, I had that friend who's famous. This is that one friend who everybody knows. But I have the privilege of saying today that I have a friend who creates impact. And that's who I find in Sylvia Esponero, who is the program officer of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. Now, even though I know Sylvie for a very long time as a friend, whenever we do get to catch up in the short time that she does have between her long-term activities that she does for the country and for the global community, she's told me recently that she's now been selected as the local representative for the Climate Vulnerable Forum Secretariat to support the Bangladesh government presidency of the CVF. Bangladesh is obtaining the CVF presidency for the 2nd time and the 2nd term in a row. And it's chaired by our Honorable Prime Minister, who takes a very vested interest in, of course, climate change. She's based in the South Asia Regional Office of the Global Center of Adaptation, and she's currently supporting the CVF envoy. As part of her role, she's also has to look after, safeguarding the 1.5 degree Paris Agreement goals, CVF V20 climate prosperity plans, in coordination with various ministries of Bangladesh, which include the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of Finance, of the Environment, Forest and Climate Change, as well as the permanent missions of the Bangladesh government. Prior to joining here, she worked in the UNDP, so more SDG support, I think, and knowledge we'll get to share from Sylvie. And she is, having a very important role in working on the renowned climate change program of the resilience marketplace concept. Moreover, she hones young minds and the future environment superheroes of Bangladesh, as she is an adjunct lecturer of North-South University in the Department of Environment. Sylvie, we'd love to hear from you and tell us what you're doing for the country and for the climate.
Well, thank you, Mamoon. I hope you can hear me properly. If you just give me a thumbs up, I'll be able to. All right, great. Oh, thank you so much, Mamoon. You're doing an excellent moderation. And first of all, I really want to thank the Global Chambers for arranging such a timely webinar. And I was listening to Carolina, Christina, and Shihab. I was just amazed to see how much complementarity we have in all our work. So I'm really, really happy that I'm actually very privileged to share the screen with all of you, and I've learned myself so much in the last 1 hour. So I don't have a slide. I'm sorry, Mahmoud. As you know that I teach and that I kind of tend to speak more, but I'll just take you through a small story that always motivates me for the work that I do. As you were saying that I was in UNDP year before, and when I was moving my job from UNDP to the CVF, I had an opportunity to visit the hanging village of Bangladesh. It's in the southern western side of the country, which remains particularly vulnerable to climate impacts. As you know, that our country, Bangladesh, is particularly vulnerable to different types of natural disasters, starting from rainfall, heavy rainfall, cyclone, and many others. And the Sundarbans, the natural forest, mangrove forest, acts as a natural buffer to most of these livelihoods and people who are living in the southwestern region. And I was so amazed to see how much capacity are retained in the people who are constantly fighting with the climate change problems in our country. And I was just wondering who speaks on behalf of these people. Who are the spokesmen for these people at a national level, who want to advocate for these people to say that this is a fight for justice. Because as you know, that these countries which are suffering from climate change are least responsible for the problem itself. So as Christina and Carolina, you both were mentioning about, why it is so important to be inclusive, and injustice comes as a very, very big rationale in why we do the work that we do. We are working for people who are less fortunate, all of us actually, we're less fortunate, who have less voice. So how can we provide a solution that lasts? So coming back from that trip which was eye-opening for me. We moved on to discussing how the issue of vulnerability can be changed to resilience, and from resilience to prosperity. That's the same notion with which the presidency of the CVF is moving at this point. That in order to be sustainable as a community, we first need to know that whatever actions are taken forward is done because we are not vulnerable, and we're not asking for money because we need it, because just we are vulnerable, but we are also capable. And there is no better example than Bangladesh and the people who constantly suffer and just come across these challenges all the time, to realize and show the entire world that we are really examples of global adapters. We can adapt to everything. So with that, I want to, go on to my next set of what I want to say. That first, it's important to understand the problem itself. Where is the problem? The problem is not in, not engraved. Probably some of the problems are engraved in where we work and how we are set up as a society, especially in Bangladesh, where resource constraint and capacity constraints play a large role. But when you think about different issues, that are we really responsible for the problems that we are suffering from, the change in dynamics take place a lot. So when I was working at UNDP as well, we were really advocating for a solution that lasts, and where different type of stakeholders can come into action in one single multi-stakeholder platform. And I think I want to just focus on climate change because it is a sector which needs the advocacy and the partnership of different stakeholders. It's not just private sectors, but everybody, especially in the research and development sector. The government is already doing so much in terms of having its own climate change trust fund in Bangladesh to ensure that people have the right resources, are addressing the right risks, and also the funds are going to the right people. But what happens is, when I want to discuss about the problems of injustice, climate finance is a very big issue, and we are trying to have more enhanced climate finance for addressing these problems. Now, if adaptation is an issue that we need to focus on, if you look at the global finance architecture on climate change, there is a very little margin of climate finance which is going to adaptation, because most of the money is going towards mitigation, which is to reduce the greenhouse gases. But these people who work so hard and have very limited resources need more capacity to build up so that they are more equipped to handle this and tackle this crisis. And how to do this? The way to do this is to bring all these people together where there is a very little gap between the demand and the supply side actors. And when I say the demand side actors, I'm actually referring to this climate vulnerable population. And when I'm looking at the supply side actors, it ranges on a large level, starting from government, private sector, research and development, who can actually give these people the right resources that they need. And since I'm working on climate change and environment, I can, my field is quite narrow, so I can just speak on behalf of the solution that works, especially, solutions need to be context specific and needs to be ones that can be imbibed and taken forward by these people who are, have low literacy rate, which has disproportionate marginalized population who are vulnerable, especially women and children. You also have to think about the youth who are the future generation, but they're also in this crisis. They're not understanding how to deal with this crisis in a sustainable way. So when these people are brought together in one umbrella and they are given the right capacities to hone their skills and advocate their skills, they can become the supply side actors themselves. And they can then train other people to come up with solutions that are not only context specific, but they are also environmentally sustainable. They have solutions that are nature based, and that can eventually be a way to foster more business that are environmentally friendly and green and low carbon. So when these all come into one single way, one single pathway, all the dots that we're talking about connect automatically. And you were mentioning about the sustainable development goals, which obviously is the Agenda 2030, some of our prime, Bangladesh is working on different streams in parallel, starting from the 8th five-year plan to the SDGs, and now we're also advocating for the Paris Agreement, the 1.5 degrees goal under the CBF presidency. All these are so pertinent, especially for the ones who suffer from these problems. I also want to bring about one other issue, which is the big Paris, the big conference on climate change, which is coming up. So when we're talking about the local people, the people who really adapt to the problems and come up with their own solutions, I was asking you this question, that who speak on behalf of these people at this international levels, so that the big countries and the big emitters know why they need to finance these people, because they're least responsible for the problems themselves. So at the Conference of Parties, the Bangladesh government is going with a big climate emergency pact. We have very recently, in fact, this week, have recently published our manifesto from the Climate Vulnerable Forum, where we are going to strongly advocate for 50-50 allocation of finance between adaptation and mitigation, so that poor people have the right balance of climate finance to deal with the solutions. And we also want to have more multi-stakeholder approach of different people, especially different sectors, including the private sector, because the money has to come from the private sector. And we are talking about profitability and sustainability and where it meets. Sometimes, there is a debate on what is the global adaptation goal, because with mitigation, you can measure, and these are tangible differences that you can see. You can measure, the difference in the greenhouse gases emissions before and after, but with adaptation, it's very difficult to quantify. So that's why when it comes to the profitability, adaptation takes a back seat. But we need to think about solutions that our local government can imbibe and take it down and transcend into the local communities so that they're also equally equipped. And there are many livelihood opportunities and job opportunities which need to be created that actually takes these livelihood opportunities more resilient to climate change. Because, for example, sectors like agriculture, fisheries, these are very dependent on climate change impacts. When there's a natural disaster, the paddies go washed away and the farmers are striving and struggling for their new livelihood opportunities. They migrate to cities like, the urban cities where there are more economic opportunities. And these are some very cardinal problems. So why can't they stay in their locality and have a livelihood opportunity which is sustainable and that they have enough market access, not just because of the people who are suffering, but even the women who are in the households, who are mostly looking after their family and the management of the assets. They can have an inclusion approach in the decision-making process of local government. So these things need to be transcended from the national level into the local level through lots of different problems and advocacy. I think these are some important things that I wanted to discuss, especially to call for more solidarity, because as CVF, the presidency has also one another priority, which is the issue of loss and damage. As you see that the losses and damages that incur from the climate change problems are, sometimes intangible, sometimes they can't be measured. I was just seeing a picture of a graveyard which was just overwhelmed with water that has that was washed away because of a recent flood. So these are the losses that you can't account for. These, once they're gone, they're gone. But how do they account for these? So we want to call for solidarity from all across the world so that these issues are taken into account and there are more finance which are addressing these issues which are not really accounted for in usual terms. Lastly, I want to discuss about the efforts of the Bangladesh government, which is absolutely, I have been having the privilege to work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Environment, and the Ministry of Finance, and the way the interministerial coordination is happening to support the local government, also to bring in advocacy so that the international players are equally aware of the situation that's going on at the local level, not just in the South Asian region, but across the Pacific, the Latin American region, the Caribbean region, and also the Asian perspective. All these countries that are sometimes, island countries, sometimes they're landlocked, but not all these countries are least developed countries. Some of them are also rich countries, but they remain vulnerable from climate change. So how can we have a common goal towards addressing this global issue is something that we need to talk about. And to have that common solution to this problem, we need unity. And that's why I also want to come back and thank you once again for bringing us all together to discuss the sustainable solutions to take forward these issues, because we need to talk now and there is no time left. So thank you so much, Mahmoud, for having me, and I'd love to be in touch with everybody. If you need more information, then I'm always available through my friend Mahmoud for any further information on the Climate Vulnerable Presidency. And I hope this COP26, which will be held in Glasgow this year, brings about some great ambitious target for climate actions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sylvie. And I think this is my first professional interaction with you. And it was lively, it was insightful, and it was knowledgeable. Thank you so much. I think we're nearing the end of our session today. Our initial deliveries were so impactful, so enriched with content. So I think it's given us a lot to ponder about. But I've taken a few notes. I think some issues that have been resounding over and over through all the four speakers is that, you see, change is possible now. There is an established means of going through a certification like the B Corp system that actually puts everyone, every stakeholder aligned towards the common goal of doing better. You can also go forward to similar models and incubations like social businesses in ecosystems. I think moreover, what we've learned is the environment is no more an issue just for developing countries, or that any of these sustainability issues are something that developing nations can say that they are incapacitated to date. They are not. They do have the ability, they are taking the lead. I'm proud to say as a Bangladeshi today that we are doing it in some areas. And I believe that initiatives like what the Unicenter is doing in the emerging markets, like Colombia, like East Africa, that this will grow further. It was also really good to hear that a B Corp movement that started in the USA is growing even better outside of the United States. And I'm sure that a dynamic movement like this that is continuously changing every 3 years with its certification, recertification, and reinvigorating itself to stay relevant and to stay sustainable. We understand that environment is something that we have to work towards. We also understand that working for our people, our employees, our livelihoods, and taking part in common goals are equally relevant. The time to work on this is now, and we can't stop. I think there was this, general question, and I think this addresses everyone. Why should, in the era of capitalism, should we, let it take second place to profitability or sustainability, or thinking about the environment? I think because it just makes sense. I think that's what all the 4 speakers said today. Because sustainability is actually making sense. Because it is a future we are in right now, where working for a particular social good does not have to be exclusive of working for profitability. This is actually enough of an incentive for every stakeholder to stay relevant. I thank every one of our speakers today for the opportunity. I would have loved to quiz them a little bit further, but sadly we're just running short on time. But what we do have is a small token of recognition that we'd like to present to all of you digitally, because we're all working virtual as well. So we'd like to give a small token, and if Cesar could help me with this, I will just present it to you guys, and we'll take a small snapshot as you present it. We're trying to live the virtual life, as it says. Right, firstly, I'd like to present this to Carolina. Carolina, thank you so much for giving that brilliant keynote. I think Cesar will just take a small picture with you, spotlighting you over there. Thank you so much for coming in, Carolina. I hope to learn more from you about B Corp. And if I could get my hands on the presentation, I'd love to go through it.
Thank you. I'd be happy to share the presentation. And if I can just say one quick thing, the B impact assessment is a free tool. So there are fees related to the certification, but anybody can use the impact assessment as a tool. And built into it is an SDG action manager. So Shihab and Sylvie both mentioned the SDGs. B Lab worked with the UN to actually look at what are specific practices that can advance the individual SDGs. And again, that is built into the impact assessment as a free tool. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware of that as a resource, and encourage everybody to use it. So thank you.
Excellent, amazing. Good to know. We'll then give this to Shabai. Shabai, thank you so much for coming out of your busy schedule and sharing those fun anecdotes.
Stop calling me bhai. You're making me look old and feel old.
All right, Shab. Thank you so much, brother.
Let me put on my glasses. It's a great honor. I would like to thank the social business community and every other person who did not sleep while I talked. And the potential is endless.
We should have been giving you the Academy Awards.
All right.
This is the long run.
Yeah.
All right.
I should thank you.
All right. We'll move on to Christina. Christina, we love working with you on this, and I'd love to work furthermore on creating sustainable awareness Globinars in the future. So thank you so much, Christina.
Oh, thank you, Maimun. It's a pleasure to be here. And I love working with you too. So there's more to come, right?
Of course. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, if you want to connect with amazing individuals like Christina and of course our other panelists here, join the Global Tribe. Go to www.globalchamber.org. You will meet amazing people from 525 metros who will help you grow, be global, be unstoppable, and be sustainable, of course, after today. Thank you, Christina. And finally, Sylvie, thank you for putting the icing on the cake. I look forward to hearing amazing stories from the upcoming, session on climate change, and I can, then have one of those pictures with you, and I can tell everybody, hey, look who I know. She went to the climate change conference. So thank you so much for coming today, Sylvie.
Thank you so much, Maimun, and the entire team, including Caesar and everybody who has worked so hard. I know some of my students are also working with you, Maimun, so I want to congratulate your entire team for having us. So well done, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, and I think with that, we can call it a wrap. I would be privileged to work with every one of these people, and if some of the audience today would like to get a copy of some of the slides, we'll try to make them available for you with the consent of the speakers. But that's all for tonight from this warm night in Dhaka City. Wherever you are, stay global, stay unsolvable. We'll see you soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, team. Thank you, Caesar, for
Bye.
helping out.